Scotland?
Just barely.
And who is your traveling companion?
A new student.
New?
Yes, sir. I'm starting school as a 5th year.
We didn't.
Hogwarts Legacy. Saying that Hogwarts Legacy is one of the most expected video games in history will be a misunderstanding. This game has been in the most waiting or most expected game from many years since its 2018 footage leaked. Ever since, people have been craving for these games to come out, not just those that are fans of the Harry Potter universe, but also players in general. And to be honest, from my point of view, the game is a resounding success. The game was released a couple of days ago, but however, many people had an access 3 days before if you bought the deluxe edition, which was more expensive. And even then, the game came break some records as one of the most played single-player games. So as you can see, this is a very awaited game. And I have to say that from a technical perspective, the game delivers in many areas. It's not perfect, but I have to say, as an Unreal 4 game, it's one of the most beautiful games you're going to see. Because the textures are super rich, the lighting is really beautiful, and the geometrical density is quite high. There is so much to see and do, so many things moving around, so many details that you are going to feel overwhelmed and also excited to explore this beautiful world. One of the things that will caught your attention is the geometrical density of everything. You can see objects and many things and many different characters moving around Hogwarts and also outside of Hogwarts, which there is a lot of different outdoors areas that are quite beautiful to behold. However, this game is not to say that it's perfect. It has some problems that I'm going to be mentioning along the way. However, one of the things that I like the most about the game is the particle system and the illumination of it. Every spell has particles going around, floating and going in every direction, illuminating the areas and characters and objects around them. That makes these games a really beautiful thing to behold. Add on top of this the ray tracing options, which are not perfect, and I hope Warner come with a patch to fix this, specifically Avalanche, because I think there are some areas where the game can improve when talking about ray tracing, especially because the ray tracing effects are very low res, which makes many things grainy. However, as you can see in this image, the textures and the particles and the illumination and the characters are just beautiful and well integrated, and the animations are superb. However, one area will say I'm not completely sold on is, for example, on the facial animations. You're going to see some of the characters not being animated as good when it comes to convey some of the emotions they are trying to describe. It's not as egregious as it was in A Plague Tale Requiem. However, I think this could have been done better, especially because of the quality of everything else in the game. The distant views, the foliage, the woods, everything else is so well done that is one of those areas that kind of show the lack of effort. I have to say, even though I have been praising the graphics, this game is not looking for like a realistic graphic style. It's more like sort of a CGI movie with a particular art style that suits the game very well with what it's trying to convey. And as I mentioned before, you can see, for example, on this scene, how rich it is in terms of geometry. You can see a lot of details, a lot of debris, a lot of objects, everything in the world is so well integrated that is honestly really a beautiful game to behold. One thing I would like to mention before we start with what is the performance analysis is that I don't care about numbers so much. And what I mean with this is that I have seen reports of this game using a lot of VRAM, which is true. It's a case of the game using lots of VRAM and people saying that some cards are going to be short, GPUs with not enough RAM can play the game well. And to be honest, that's not the sort of information I try to give you guys. What I try to show you is how the game behaves. I don't care about the technicalities. I do care personally, but not to show that to you. It doesn't matter if the game is using 27 gigabytes of RAM, if the game is playing well on the GPU we are using. So that's what I want to show you, how to get to those 60 FPS, not how well the game will run, because all I'm trying to give you an idea of how the game will behave depending on the hardware you're using. As I was mentioning before, look, this is one of example of the facial animation I was trying to say about. You can see here that the characters are not really conveying emotion as good as I think they should, and they are a little bit stiff when it's about talking, expressions, and so on. So I think this is a good example of what I was saying before. It's not that it's bad, but the quality of the character is so good, the animations stand out as not being as good as I think they could be, or compare with other games that are also, you know, AAA production. So that's one of those areas that I'm not super happy. However, you can see here the lighting is quite good, the illumination, the particle system, everything, the debris, and it moves and feels so smooth when you're playing with it, that honestly it creates this magical feeling where everything generates a sort of an aura, it feels really magical, if I can use that word, with this game, because I think they have taken care of every detail, and you can see every single spell and location feeling really different and having this like out of this world feeling that is not normally conveyed through some other games that try to put you like in these magical places, but they end up feeling mundane. I think here the art direction is great and everything in the game looks phenomenal, except for one thing that you probably are seeing at the moment, and I'm going to be discussing about it a little bit later on the analysis. But it's one of those things that I think damage what is another level of quality. Like, this could be so much better if it wasn't for these little details that I think they put a black spot on what is a very good technical perspective. Another particular issue I have with this game is this sort of haze that the game has. It may be this particular room, but I have found this more over the game, that is like it gives these games this little grayish look, or like there is fog everywhere, that is sort of annoying from my perspective. You can see here that even though we are outside, the game still keeps that, I don't know, sort of grayish color that makes everything looks a little bit duller than I think it should, and the game should be, have or need like a more contrasty look. So this sort of game, normally people correct this using things like reshade or something where they give this more popping colors, but I'm not quite sure why is this looking like that in this game. I think it's one of those things that it's not a big deal, but it doesn't make it look better. When talking about ray tracing, I'm going to show you some comparison here. So you can see some difference, like the ray tracing and no ray tracing. You can see that the shadows on ray tracing are better defined, that the character is self-shadow itself, and that objects are more cemented in the ground and in reality with the ray tracing shadows active. The reflections are not great because they, for example, don't work on pool of waters and other areas, so they are not that great, and they are a little bit grainy from my like. However, you have a whole set of options to change the game in any way you want, and that's so great because they did do a great port to PC or a great PC version, because you have DLSS, XeSS, FSR 1.0, 2.0, and even NVIDIA NIS. So you have all kind of options to set the game the way you want it. So talking about the game and continuing as I was talking before, we were talking about the outdoors and we were talking about the graphics. And you can see here that the game has not only great interiors, but also very rich outdoor scene. You can see all the grass swaying in the wind. You can see all the trees and all the elements. However, you can keep on seeing and spotting the problem that is one of the issues that I have more problems with in the game. And I'm still not going to talk about it because I want to see if by this point you realize what is that I'm talking about. I think it's the biggest problem the game has in terms of graphical quality. There are other areas that the game shows there is good and great, but that to me is a big no-no. That has to do with the shadow distance drawing. You can see the shadows appearing basically in front of you, which makes things really take you out of the experience. The shadows are being drawn too close to the characters. Many shadows appear just out of nowhere while you are playing and they just pop up. And even with ray tracing shadow, this problem is common. They don't draw the shadows far enough for this to be no notice, and which is weird because the drawing distance of objects is quite good, but it's then the shadow behind the object that makes them pop out like out of nowhere. And this is for any sort of shadows. Obviously this doesn't happen in every single area, but it happens a lot, which is the other problem that the game has, that sometimes it doesn't load characters or objects fast enough. When the camera changes, you can see things appearing, or when you are approached to a door that is supposed to open, sometimes you can be there for a couple of seconds before whatever is behind that door loads. The game compiles shaders at the beginning, which is good because it helps you avoid stuttering. However, you're going to find that there is still stuttering during gameplay, which should not happen if they compile the shader. But you will realize that the second time you start the game will compile shaders once again, much faster than the first time. So I am inclined to think that the game is not compiling all the shaders it needs when it starts the game, which is a shame because then basically we're doing this whole shader compiling for nothing, even though the stuttering is not as bad as in other games. But now starting with the performance analysis, I as usual start with the CPU performance analysis, and in this game I use an all i7-6700K. That I have to say that you won't be able to get 60 constant FPS with a quad-core CPU in this game. You will need at least 6 cores if you want to be able to play this game at 60 FPS. So in this case, an Intel i7-6700 will keep you around 45 to 50 FPS. Yes, you can get to 60 FPS at some points, but it's not going to be the norm. It's more like an exception. So this you have to take into consideration when you're depending on the CPU you are using. So I would recommend for this title to use at least a 6-core CPU sort of mother. I would say probably like a 26 or 3600 and upwards should be good for 60 FPS. However, even though that quad core is not going to get you to 60, it is going to get you to a perfect and flat 30 FPS no matter what you are using. Because in that case you can cap the game and you're going to enjoy and have a very good experience in that sense. So that's a very good thing considering how old the i7-6700 XT K is, and especially because even with ray tracing on Ultra, the CPU will be able to still deliver 30 FPS. So I know nobody's going to have a ray tracing card with this CPU probably, but still it's interesting to see that this CPU will be able to give you that experience even with ray tracing on, and the game still looks quite smooth, to be honest. So after testing the CPU, the first thing I do is test with my own PC, which is my top-of-the-line PC with an RTX 4090 and an Intel i7 13700KF and 64 gigs of RAM. In this way, I can see what the best of the game can offer. And I have to say that even in this quality you are seeing at the top, which is everything and DLS on quality mode, you are going to get under 60 FPS from time to time. So this means it's not enough to actually get that smooth experience that we maybe are trying to look at here, even with a 4090. And there are still going to be some stutterings from time to time while the game is trying to, I guess, compile some shaders. That's the weird part of this shader compiling. It's like they are doing it in batches, so I don't know why is that the case. However, you can see here that the game will run quite good even in those situations, and even on HOGWARTS or on Hogsmeade, which is the area I'm going to be testing, because according to many of the biggest reviewers and benchmarkers, that's one of the heaviest areas of the game. So I will be testing all in there, so I had to play that area like 20,000 times. In any case, you can see here that even with ray tracing and everything active, the game looks quite good. And the FPS is not bad, but we're talking about a 4090, which, you know, shows you that there is something wrong, because sometimes the GPU is not being used at full. So this is probably a CPU limitation, which is weird that this game really, when you see that it's not using the multi-cores as good as I think it should. As you can see the utilization of this CPU up there. So it's quite a weird situation. However, there is an ace here, that is the DLSS 3. When you activate DLSS 3, you're going to get over 100 FPS, at least on this title, and I could not find any weird 4 off frame or anything at that fast. And maybe you can see it here because this is recorded at 60 FPS instead of 120, but I could not honestly find anything that will show me that I was using fake frames, like some people call it. So I think if you have a 4070, 4080, well, in the future a 4060 or 4050, it's going to be a very good technology to use to smooth those frames and get a very good experience, because I, as I said, have not been able to find anything wrong. Now, I have recently updated my test bench to be at 12,600 KF to avoid some comments about the CPU not being fast enough, according to some people. So I hope this now give you a better idea of the performance. And I was a little bit worried when I was going to test the GTX 1060, because I thought this wasn't going to be up to the task. But as you can see here, we can get a good 60 FPS experience by setting medium settings, evidently no ray tracing, but setting the FSR to balance. And I think it still looks quite good and quite attractive from my point of view. As you can see here, the game is running at 60 FPS, no problem.
I'm here for the
and this is the part where I was saying about the CPU, the VRAM utilization. This is just a 6 gigabyte card, and even though here the game is using what it can, so it's only using 4.5 gigs of RAM. And so I'm not really worrying about how much VRAM is using or how much VRAM is using when you have a high-class GPU. What I care is how the game performs when I am actually playing the games, and not caring if it's using or not too much VRAM. In this case, we can see that the game is running no issues whatsoever. It goes under 50 and so on, and obviously you can lower the quality or you can limit the game to 30 FPS, but from my point of view, this is a game that can be enjoyed at 60 FPS on a 1060 by setting this up. So I have to say, I'm quite happy and pleased that the 1060 is still giving so many joys to so many players, and have proven to be this legendary card that is still in 2023 is able to play almost everything. So after this, obviously I went with the 2060 6GB because, and I went a little overboard, because after seeing the result with the 1060, I put this game at 1440p using DLSS balance and ray trace in high and just activating shadows and reflection, because the AO doesn't really work on this game, at least not in this moment, unless you modify the any settings for the game. So I would recommend not even activating, because you're not getting nothing out of it. So as you can see here, the game runs quite decently. You can obviously change things like resolution, going to 1080p probably if you want more performance, or if you want a complete and steady 60 FPS, which I think you can get on 40p, and those drops we see is more stutterings from shader compilation than anything else. And I was quite pleased to see how well this game ran on a 2066 GB after hearing all the problems with the VRAM that people were commenting. So yeah, I'm happy with the results here, and I think you will be too. As you can see, I'm still, playing on Hogsmeade. I'm testing and going around everywhere I can just to try to stress the CPU and GPU. And you can see the GPU going up to 80%, which is a good margin, just in case there is anything like more demanding, so you still have a little bit of space to grow, and so the GPU is not being taxed 100% at all times. That's something, a balance that I like to find, because if you have the GPU taxed at 100% all the time, then it means that if anything happens that needs more power, then you are not going to be able to follow it. So I try to find that fine balance there. I have to say I was a little bit disappointed with the 3060 performance. I don't know if it's because of the game or the card itself. We know that the 3060 is more powerful than the 2060. However, by changing any settings on the game above what we have with the 2060, I was not able to achieve a 60 steady FPS, which is quite weird, to be honest, but that was the case. So at the end, the only things I was able to modify and still keep a steady 60 FPS were the textures. I moved them to ultra and shadows, but if I try to move all the settings to ultra, or activate or improving the ray tracing from high to ultra, I will get from 45 to 60 FPS. So it was a bigger margin or a bigger range of FPS than I was getting on the 2060. So I don't know if the margin that the 3060 is not enough to improve this game in other settings. Now then, after this, as you can see here, I try in any way to find areas where the game will go down, but no, it maintains a steady 60. But you see there up top that the margin of GPU utilization is almost the same as the 2060, and this is just by improving shadows and texture. So probably what is happening here is that the improvement in power that the 3060 provides is not enough as the consumption of higher settings. So unfortunately in this game, for at least for me, this is sort of the sweet spot. But I was able, as you can see, to use a better texture, and you can see that the VRAM is used on 9 gigs in this case, which is good considering this card with 12 gigabytes of VRAM. So yeah, that's a good thing that you can get out of the 3060 when playing the Hogwarts Legacy game. And of course, as usual, I had to test it with the Intel Arc 750 because it's one of my hidden gems of GPU, and I love this card. However, I have to say I was a little bit disappointed with the performance on this game, and I don't know if this is because the game is not very Intel friendly or because the driver is not good enough for this game. Because the reason I'm saying this, because we know that the 750 is able to even to surpass the 3060. However, as you can see here, even using 1440p XeSS balance high settings with no ray tracing, the game is not able to keep 60 FPS at all times. So I'm not sure what's going on here, and if this is a bandwidth problem, is a bad implementation of XeSS, I'm not quite sure. Because then I decided to test this game at 1080p, and the results were quite different, in the sense that now we're testing the game at 1080p with XeSS in ultra quality, not even balance mode, but now I was able to up the settings to ultra and activate all the ray tracing settings to ultra RT, and the game is keeping 60 FPS almost flat, only for those stupid stutterings. But other than that, the game is running flawlessly, so I don't understand how going from 1080p with RT and everything on ultra to 1440p with no RT, XeSS balance, and even high settings is making that huge difference in this game. I'm not sure what's going on here, and I think there has to be a driver problem or a combination of factors. However, the RTX 750 is proving to be able to move this game very well, at least on at 1080p. Maybe there is another issue going on, but at 1080p is just flawless. When I was testing that, I decided to go AMD, and this time I'm going to test it with the 5600 XT. And in this case, you can see that the less is better. In this case, we don't have RT options and we don't have many other things, and I was able to test this game at 1080p, high settings, evidently no RT, and no problem, no FSR, no DLSS, no nothing, and the game is just running very good at 60 FPS. So that's very good news. Evidently, if you want, you could play this game at 1440p by activating FSR probably in balance mode, and you will still get a very good experience at 60 FPS. So FSR is doing a very good job here, and from my eyes, it looks very good. Obviously, we start detailing the game with zoom and stuff. We are going to find out that there is some nitpicking things and difference here that I find interesting from a technical point of view, but not from a gameplay perspective. So this is why I don't go to those details, because I don't think it matters as long as we are just trying to play the game in the best settings. And in this case, well, it's 1080p native. We could go 1440p FSR, and probably we are going to have the same experience as good as it is. Or you know, I'm not going to say you can play this game at 4K, but you probably could limit 30 FPS and maybe activating ultra settings 1440p. So it's up to you, and that's one of the beauties of PC, that you are the one deciding exactly how you want to play the game. But I have to say that I love the RX 5600 XT, and you can get it for a very good price, and I find that this is a very good car if you're trying to build a budget system at the moment with used parts. For the moment, as new, I would recommend the RX 750. Went a little bit up with the 6600 XT. I have to say that I was pleasantly surprised, because honestly the car behaved much better than I thought it was going to be. In this case, we were able to activate RT shadows and reflection in high, put the game in 1440p FSR 2 balance with ultra settings, and as you can see here, the game is running like the champion, 60 FPS on a 6600 XT. Yes, it's one of the fastest cars I have tested here in terms of medium or middle class GPUs, because it's much faster than the 3060, but the 3060 we saw that there was not much we could do, while here, well, I think we are getting a much better quality, considering that we have RT activated, because the 6600 is faster than the 3060, but normally that means that you don't activate many RT options. But in this case, I was able to activate the same RT options as the 3060 and get a better behavior than it was before. So I'm quite pleased with this and the result for the 6600, which is one of the cards I would recommend. Even though it's a little bit more expensive than the RX 750, we can see here that it's behaving much better. But I think that's just specific to this title, because we have seen the 750 behave much better when RT is active in other titles. So, well, you know, your may vary. Sorry for that bad pronunciation there. But my tongue is a little bit stiff today, and honestly, it's getting
you wouldn't mind helping me put a few
worse
things back to where they
the more
were.
I try to narrate these things. So, but
Officer
we are going to
Singer.
close this analysis by showing the Steam Deck results. In this case, I'm using 720p FSR balance with medium settings. I think you can use FSR quality with low settings, but from my perspective, I prefer graphical quality. A medium settings give me a more distance a better draw distance that will show a better buildings over the distance and some other areas, which I would prefer over the resolution. Because at the end, when you're playing on that small screen, there is not going to be a much difference of watching on that and between FSR balance and FSR quality. But as I said, at the end of the day, you can decide what you want to do. Obviously, this is a game that is going to run at a cap of 30 FPS. The footage you're seeing here is captured at 720p, but the game will run basically the same using the 800p resolution, so you should not have to worry too much about it. However, one thing I'm going to say is that the game tends to stutter a little bit more. Even if you don't see that dropping, it behaves a little bit weird, and I think this has to do with the proton layer. It doesn't feel as smooth smooth as when we were playing with 30 FPS cap on the 6700K, which is why I think this has to do more with the Proton layer than the actual capacities of the Steam Deck. But in any case, I think you're going to have a very good experience with the Steam Deck, and I find just amazing to be able to play games like this on the go on the day of release. We're not talking a game specifically made for this. The Switch version is not even out yet, and we can enjoy Hogwarts Legacy on the go, and I find that honestly amazing that we can just, you know, be saying on 2023 I'm playing Hogwarts Legacy on the go, and it's a game that graphically is great. So imagine what it's going to be when the Steam Deck 2 comes. So with this, I will end my very long video, and I hope you liked it. I know it hasn't been as smooth as I would like it to be. The narration today, for some reason, it's not coming as good as I would like to. But well, I still think you can get a lot of useful information from this review. If you like it, please subscribe, like the video, and share it on your social networks, and see you on the next one.